I hate to say this. You're going to think I'm a bad mother. Sometimes I regret having my daughter. Akemi is a Japanese woman in her 40s living in Tokyo, Japan, navigating her role as a mother and wife with a full-time career. In the middle of a busy day working for a major media company, she spoke with me over video chat. When I asked her about her experience as a mother, she told me about the lack of support from her husband, her lack of spare time, and the confusion of holding multiple roles. Her reflections encapsulate the complexities women experience in contemporary urban Japan. Akemi is one of several women I interviewed navigating at the crossroads of gender, labor, motherhood, and government policy in Japan. During summer 2024, I conducted ethnographic fieldwork in Tokyo, seeking to understand how Japanese women experience motherhood as it is shaped by intersecting structures of political economy, welfare systems, and cultural ideologies. Focused on interviews with four women of varying marital and child-rearing statuses, my research is also informed by interviews with some men and my experiences living in Tokyo. Women have increasingly participated in the Japanese workforce since the post-war era, with the number of dual-income households in Japan surpassing those with a full-time housewife in the 1990s. The housewife, male breadwinner family model has declined as women have achieved higher rates of education, become exposed to Western ideas of gender equality, and increasingly pursued desires outside of marriage and motherhood. Though women have made some progress in paid labor, the gender division of unpaid domestic labor has persisted, and the social norm that family life is a woman's responsibility remains unchallenged. Akemi explained that her generation is in the midst of a cultural shift, that the world we live in is changing. Men need to cook and do chores. However, many men, including Akemi's husband, are not willing to do so and were not taught how to fulfill domestic responsibilities. Through expression of inner conflicts surrounding her conception of self, Akemi reveals the tensions that emerge as the demand for a reconfiguration of domestic labor outpaces the reality of entrenched and gendered practices. Speaking about her experience as a mother, she said, "I'm still not able to find the right answer. There are moments where I feel jealous of people with no kids, but then I look at my daughter. I get confused. Which side is my true self?" Representative of many employed women with children in Japan, Akemi's sentiments exemplify the challenges mothers face to negotiate their role and personhood as women in transforming Japanese society. She struggles to find the quote-unquote right answer in balancing work, family, and her life. Work-life balance for mothers in reality is work-family balance. When I asked her how she viewed herself as a mother, Akemi said, "My free time is my daughter's free time. It makes me forget who I am." Anita Gary explores how the home and workplace are represented as conflicting domains wherein being oriented towards one detracts from the other, representing a, quote, inability to conceptualize for women the integration of a commitment to work and a commitment to family, unquote, meaning that employed women with children are culturally positioned as less than fully committed mothers. For the relatively small but increasing number of women who remain employed in regular careers through marriage and motherhood, reconciling work and family is difficult amidst a mismatch of ideology and practice. Conceptions of motherhood and family in Japan are complex historical constructs that have evolved in tandem with broader economic and political developments, particularly the rise of the post-war capitalist state. Rooted in the Meiji-era ideal of the good wife, wise mother who serves the state by tending to her husband and children with pride, modern conceptions of motherhood as a cultural position and identity in Japan is a labor-intensive role that demands mothers to be extremely attentive towards managing their children's social and educational success. Although the post-war legal system theoretically established gender equality, Japan's developmental nationalist project towards economic growth organized the domestic sphere and gender relations. Women were positioned to dominate the home separate from capitalist production, revealing how the division between work and motherhood is a constructed ideal shaped by broader systems of political economy. Similarly, more recent policies such as the 1986 Equal Employment Opportunity Law and Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's Womenomics agenda have sought to increase women's labor force participation and promote gender equality. However, these initiatives have not resulted in meaningful cultural or structural shifts. Japan's welfare system continues to rely on the gender division of labor. Consequently, women's domestic responsibilities have not changed in accordance with their work, placing women like Akemi at the heart of a system that demands their labor, yet does not support it. In contrast, the Tanaka family represents a relative convergence of ideology and practice. Referring to themselves as a power couple, the Tanakas are an exception to the conversation around declining birth rates and gender inequality. They have 3 children, 2 boys aged 8 and 4, and 1 girl aged 6. Both Mr. and Mrs. Tanaka are highly educated and work full-time jobs. They even participated in a nonprofit that helps couples to decide if they're ready to have kids. When they invited me to their home for dinner, their commitment to an egalitarian household was clear. While Mrs. Tanaka prepared dinner, Mr. Tanaka picked up the children from school. On average, men undertake about 12% of housework, and 1 of 5 don't do any housework at all. Mrs. Tanaka described their arrangement as a 60-40 split, praising her husband as a good dad. Even within this seemingly egalitarian arrangement, gendered expectations remain. When Mrs. Tanaka praises her husband as a quote-unquote good dad for doing his share, it reveals how deeply embedded the assumption still is that domestic work is primarily a woman's domain, and that a man's participation is optional or exceptional. In contrast, Akemi, who spends all of her free time with her daughter, questions herself as a mother. Moreover, the Tanaka's ability to balance work and caregiving is situated within their class status. Their dual incomes, high levels of education, and living arrangement in company housing grant them the ability to negotiate family life on more equitable terms. While the Tanakas represent a movement towards fitting the puzzle pieces of ideology and practice, it also highlights the limitations of Japan's welfare system. Japan's welfare capitalist system relies on women's unpaid domestic labor to fill in where the state does not. Though there are social programs such as childcare subsidies and parental leave, they are not accompanied by meaningful cultural change in practice. In 2022, just 17% of eligible men took parental leave, compared to 80% of eligible women. The gendered division of labor effectively privatizes caregiving by shifting responsibility onto households. The Tanakas are sharing caregiving work that the state assumes women will do alone. Families like the Tanakas remain the exception, not necessarily due to a lack of individual will, but because of inadequate structural support, both in advancing a reconciliation between work and motherhood and in decentering the nuclear family and lifelong employment system from Japan's welfare regime. Contemporary Japanese women grapple with conceptualizing their identities and desires in different ways as they confront the inevitable tensions that rise as women's shifting roles in the family and home are mediated by persistent gender ideologies. Conceptions and experiences of motherhood, labor, and care in Japan are inextricably linked to the historical and ongoing organization of gender identity through broader systems of political economy, welfare capitalism, and cultural ideologies. Situated within broader discussions of gender, labor, and identity in post-industrial societies, this research underscores the political embeddedness of care work, emphasizing how lived experience and the ostensibly private domain of the domestic is structured by broader institutional and ideological forces. It questions how women formulate and develop identity in relation to their perception, experience, and contestation of prescribed roles of motherhood. Understanding motherhood as a cultural position in Japan reflects more broadly how gender and labor identities are culturally and temporally situated. By centering the lived experiences of women, we might better reimagine caregiving, labor, and motherhood.